I used to think love and money had nothing to do with each other until the night my family made me choose between them. It started with a phone call. My mother's voice was trembling, soft and sweet in that way that always made me drop everything. Faitha, we just need a little help this time, she said. It's for your father. He's not well. That word, help, had become a familiar wound. I'd heard it too many times before. Every just this once turned into another loan, another sacrifice, another month of silence until they needed me again. But this time it felt different. Maybe because I'd finally started saving for myself, a small apartment, my own space, something that didn't have to be shared, borrowed, or given away. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Still, when it's your family asking, logic doesn't stand a chance against love. I didn't say yes right away, but I didn't say no either. I just listened as she listed their problems like a confession. Hospital bills, rent due, the fridge stopped working. The tone in her voice was guilt and pressure wrapped together. And when I finally said, I can't this time, she went quiet, the kind of silence that hurts more than words. After that night, everything changed. My phone calls were shorter, my father's messages became colder, my brother stopped replying completely. I told myself they were just stressed, that it wasn't about the money. But deep down, I knew it always was. One evening, I came home to find an envelope slipped under my door. It was from my mother. Inside was a note in her handwriting. We didn't raise you to turn your back on family. If this is what your independence means, keep it. But don't call this love. I stared at those words for a long time. My hands were shaking, my throat tight. It felt like I'd been punched with guilt. How do you explain to your own parents that love shouldn't come with a price tag? That night, I realized something I never wanted to admit. My family didn't want me. They wanted what I could give, and if I stopped giving, I stopped belonging. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment everything began to unravel. The moment I had to decide whether I'd keep paying for love or finally learn to live without it. Growing up, money was never just money in our house. It was love, loyalty, and proof that you cared. My parents didn't say, I love you much. Instead, they said things like, we worked so hard for you, or we gave you everything we could. And maybe that's why I learned early on that love was something you had to earn. When I got my first job, I still remember how proud they were. My father's eyes shone when I handed him my first paycheck. He didn't say, thank you. He said, you're a good daughter. I didn't realize it then, but that was the start of something dangerous. Every time I helped, every time I gave, their approval grew. And every time I said no, that love, that fragile, conditional love, slipped a little further away. Over the years, I became the family's safety net. My brother needed help with tuition. I paid. My mother wanted a new fridge. I covered it. My father's medical bills, I didn't even hesitate. I kept telling myself this was what good children did. But deep down, I think I was afraid of what would happen if I stopped. The truth is, my parents weren't cruel people. They didn't mean to make me feel used. They were just comfortable with me always saving them. It became routine. And routine, when mixed with guilt, starts to look a lot like love. When I finally moved out, I thought things would get better. I thought distance would make me free. But guilt has a long reach. Every visit home came with quiet requests. Just a little help this month. You know how much we've done for you. Your brother's still finding his way. And I'd fold every time. I told my friends I didn't mind, that it was family, that they'd do the same for me. But I think even then I knew they wouldn't. Because in our home, giving wasn't about kindness, it was about proving you belonged. Then came the night of that phone call, the one that shattered everything. I was exhausted from work, bills of my own piling up, dreams on hold because I was still carrying everyone else's weight. And when my mother said, it's for your father, he's not well, I felt that old panic rise again. The need to fix everything, to be the good one. But something in me broke that night. Maybe it was the years of exhaustion. Maybe it was finally realizing that love shouldn't make you feel like a wallet. Whatever it was, it made me say no. Not angrily, not cruelly, just quietly for once. I said, I can't. And in that single moment, all the love I thought was unconditional began to fade. The messages stopped, the warmth disappeared. I wasn't the good daughter anymore. I was the selfish one. That's the thing about families built on sacrifice. The moment you stop bleeding for them, they start calling you cold. What I didn't know then was that saying no wasn't the end. It was only the beginning, the part where they'd make me choose between being loved and being free. The silence didn't last long. 2 days after that phone call, my brother showed up at my apartment unannounced. He stood at the door, hands in his pockets, eyes avoiding mine. They're really upset, he said. Mom hasn't slept. Dad's blood pressure's up. You should just help. It's not a big deal. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But the truth was, it was a big deal. I'd spent years helping, years sacrificing my own peace just to keep their world from falling apart. This wasn't about one bill or one crisis. It was about a pattern, one that had quietly drained me dry. I can't keep doing this, I said, voice trembling. It's not about money anymore. It's about respect, he sighed, frustrated. You always think you're above everyone now. Just because you live alone, just because you've got a steady job. I cut him off. This isn't about being above anyone. It's about finally standing up for myself. He laughed bitterly. Stand up for yourself? Against your own parents? That word, against, stung. I wasn't trying to fight them. I just wanted boundaries. But in my family, boundaries were betrayal. That evening, my mother called again. Her voice was colder this time. So, your brother tells me you've changed, she said. You think money matters more than love now? My throat tightened. No, Amma, that's not what I'm saying. Then prove it, she snapped. If you still love us, help us. There it was, the test. Love measured in currency. I can't, I whispered. The silence that followed was long and sharp. Then she said quietly, You've become heartless. That word stayed with me for days. Heartless. The daughter who used to stay up all night with her sick father, who worked double shifts to send money home, who never said no. Now, suddenly, I was heartless because I'd said it once. The next week was a blur of guilt. My father didn't pick up my calls. My brother blocked me on social media. Even my relatives chimed in with messages about how disrespectful I'd become. It felt like losing my family piece by piece, all because I'd chosen myself. Then, one afternoon, a notification popped up on my banking app. A withdrawal. Large. Unexpected. My stomach dropped. I hadn't authorized anything. When I checked, I realized what happened. My father still had joint access to an old account I had forgotten to close. He had taken the money. I called him immediately, voice shaking. Appa, you took my savings. He didn't even sound ashamed. He said, We needed it. You wouldn't help, so we helped ourselves. It's still family money. Family money? I repeated, stunned. That was my rent, my bills, my life. He sighed like I was the problem. You wouldn't understand. You're too selfish now. That was it, the breaking point. For years, I'd bent until I barely recognized myself. But hearing those words, I realized something painful. No matter how much I gave, it would never be enough. They didn't want a daughter. They wanted a bank account. That night, I went to the bank and closed every shared account. My hands were shaking the whole time, but I knew it had to be done. For once, I was choosing me. When I got home, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Calls from my father, my mother, my brother. I didn't answer because I knew what they'd say. Not, we're sorry. Not, we love you. But, how could you? And the truth is, I'd asked myself that same question for years. How could I keep letting this happen? But not anymore. That was the night I stopped being the good daughter. That was the night I became free. The days after closing that account were quiet. Too quiet. My phone, once filled with constant calls and messages, was now a blank screen. I told myself I liked the silence, but every time it buzzed, my heart jumped. Part of me still hoped it would be my mother, not to ask for money, but just to ask how I was. That call never came. For weeks, I lived in a strange limbo, half free, half lost. I went to work, smiled when I had to, and came home to a silence that felt heavier than before. I wasn't just missing them. I was grieving the version of them I thought I had. One evening, I found myself scrolling through old messages, the cheerful emojis, the love you, beta text that always came after a transfer. I realized something then, something I'd been too scared to admit. Their love had a pattern. It came with a price tag. A few days later, my aunt called. She sounded hesitant, like she didn't really want to be the messenger. "They're saying you've abandoned them," she whispered. "Your mother's been crying. Your father says you only care about money now." I took a deep breath. "Did they tell you they took my savings?" There was a pause. Then softly she said, "They said it was for the family. You're part of that family, aren't you?" Something in me cracked then, not from anger, but from exhaustion. I realized there would never be understanding, not from people who believed sacrifice was the only way to prove love. That night, I went through my finances. Every loan, every transaction, every sacrifice I'd made for them. It wasn't just numbers on a screen. It was years of proof that I had loved them, even when it cost me everything. But to them, none of it mattered, because the moment I said no, I became the villain. I cried that night, not out of regret, but out of clarity. For the first time, I saw my family for who they really were. Not monsters, not users, just people trapped in the same cycle they'd created. A cycle where love meant giving until you had nothing left. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. I wrote a letter, not out of anger, but out of honesty. I told them I loved them, but I couldn't keep saving them, that I needed to save myself now. I wrote that love without respect isn't love, it's debt. I never sent it, but writing it felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd lost long ago. Over time, I started to see small changes in me. The guilt that once suffocated me began to fade. I started saying no more easily, not just to my family, but to anyone who saw my kindness as weakness. I started choosing peace over approval. One afternoon, months later, I ran into an old neighbor who used to live near my parents. She smiled kindly and said, "Your family talks about you. They say you've changed." I smiled back, a little sadly. "I have," I said, "for the better." Because the truth was, I didn't stop loving them. I just stopped letting their version of love destroy me. And that realization, that love doesn't have to hurt, was the discovery that finally set me free. The air in my parents' house was thick that evening, a blend of tension, guilt, and something I couldn't quite name. I stood by the door for a moment, my hand still on the handle, steadying my breath. This was the same house where I'd learned to walk, to dream, to apologize for existing. But tonight, I wasn't coming to make peace. I was coming to reclaim it. My mother was sitting on the couch, back stiff, arms crossed. My father stood near the window, pretending to watch the rain trickle down the glass. My brother hovered near the hallway, eyes darting between us like he wanted to disappear before the storm broke. I placed the stack of printed bank records on the coffee table. Cold, undeniable proof of years of betrayal. "We need to talk," I said, keeping my tone calm, though my heart pounded in my chest. My mother glanced at the papers, her expression unreadable. "About what?" she asked, already defensive. I looked straight at her. "About this," I said. "The money, the account, the lies." Her jaw tightened. "You went through our finances?" she said sharply. "That's private, Bridget. You had no right." "No right," I echoed, my voice trembling with controlled fury. "It was my account, my money. You told me it was for bills, for food, for emergencies, not to pay off credit cards or gambling bets." I turned to my father, who still refused to meet my eyes. "And not for your losses." His shoulders tensed. My mother jumped to his defense immediately, her tone fierce, but fragile. "He didn't mean for things to get so bad. We had debts, we needed help. Family helps family. That's what love is." I let out a bitter laugh. Love doesn't mean using someone until there's nothing left of them. I pointed to the record. "This isn't love. This is manipulation." My brother finally spoke, his voice low, almost pleading. "They didn't mean to hurt you, Bridget. They were just scared. They thought you could handle it." "Exactly," I said, turning toward him. They thought I could handle everything. The bills, their guilt, their silence. But it's not my job to fix them. My mother stood abruptly, her eyes flashing. After everything we've done for you, she snapped, her voice breaking, you think you're better than your own family? I felt the sting of her words, but I didn't let them land. No, Mom, I just finally understand that love without respect isn't love at all. For a moment, the room was silent except for the ticking clock on the wall. My father looked smaller somehow, older, the weight of years of choices catching up to him. My mother's anger melted into something that looked like fear. Or maybe shame. I took a breath. I'm closing the account, I said quietly. No more transfers, no more help. This ends today. My father's voice cracked the silence. If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back. Once, those words would have broken me. I would have begged, pleaded, promised to do better just to earn my place back in this family. But not anymore. I met his eyes, calm and certain. Then I guess this is goodbye. My mother gasped, tears spilling down her cheeks. You're abandoning us, she cried, reaching out like she could still pull me back with guilt. Where are your parents? I stepped back. No, I'm saving myself, I said softly, because if I keep giving, there'll be nothing left to save. My brother called out as I turned toward the door. Bridget, wait! His voice cracked, full of something like regret. I paused just long enough to live at him. Take care of yourself. And maybe take care of them too. As I walked out into the rain, their voices followed me. Anger, tears, disbelief, but I didn't turn back. Every drop that hit my face felt like a small baptism, washing away years of guilt and obligation. By the time I reached my car, I was shaking. Not from sadness, but from freedom. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the daughter that said yes to everything. I wasn't the family's safety net or their ATM. I was just me, tired, bruised, but finally free. Because in the end, it wasn't really about choosing between their love or my money. It was about choosing myself and realizing that maybe that's what love should have looked like all along. The days that followed were quiet, unnervingly quiet. No phone calls, no guilt-laced messages, no late-night requests for money. Just silence. For the first time in years, I could hear my own thoughts. At first, that silence scared me. I kept checking my phone out of habit, waiting for some sign that they still needed me, that I still mattered. But the notifications never came. The silence that once felt like punishment slowly began to feel like peace. I filled my days with small, ordinary things. Morning coffee without anxiety. Evening walks where the air didn't feel heavy. The soft hum of a life that was finally mine. It was strange how freedom could feel both beautiful and foreign at the same time. Still, guilt lingered like a shadow. Every time I passed the grocery store where my mother used to shop or saw a family laughing together in a park, I felt that ache again. The ache of wondering if I'd done the right thing. Was I heartless for choosing myself? Or was I finally learning what love wasn't? A few weeks later, I started therapy. For the first time, I said things out loud that I'd only whispered in my head. My therapist listened quietly, then said something that stuck with me. You were trained to equate love with sacrifice, but love doesn't require self-erasure. That sentence changed everything. I began to see my past differently, not as a list of mistakes, but as lessons in boundaries I never knew I was allowed to have. I stopped apologizing for resting, for saying no, for spending my money on myself. It felt like I was meeting myself for the first time, and I actually liked who I was becoming. Months passed. Life found rhythm again. My job felt less draining. My smile came easier. The dark circles under my eyes faded. I even started painting, something I hadn't done since college. It was like rediscovering color after years of living in grayscale. Then, one afternoon, my brother called. I hadn't expected it. His voice was soft, uncertain. Hey, he said, I just wanted you to know Mom and Dad are different. They talk about you sometimes. I think they finally realized what they did. For a long moment, I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to forgive them instantly, to believe they'd changed. But another part, the wiser part, knew that forgiveness doesn't always mean reconnection. Sometimes it just means letting go of the pain. I'm glad they're okay. I finally said, but I'm not ready to come back. He understood. That's fair, he said quietly. You deserve peace. When the call ended, I sat there for a while, staring at the ceiling, tears running down my face, not from sadness, but from release. For the first time, I realized I didn't need their approval to feel whole. Months turned into a year. I didn't go back. I didn't send money. And yet, I wasn't the villain of my story anymore. I was the survivor, the one who stopped drowning to teach herself how to breathe. Now, when people ask about my family, I smile softly and say, we're distant, but I'm healing. And I mean it. Because healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet acceptance that you did the best you could with what you had. Some nights, I still think about my mother's words, if you walk out that door, don't come back. They used to echo like a curse. Now, they sound like freedom. Because I didn't just walk away from them that night. I walked toward the version of myself I'd buried under years of obligation and fear. And maybe that's what real love looks like. Not choosing others at the cost of yourself, but choosing yourself so you can finally love without losing who you are.